And look at it. He says, let no one deceive you with empty words. For because of these things, the wrath of God comes on the sons of disobedience. He says, don't get fooled. Don't allow people to say things to you or give their philosophy to you that are completely empty, that are meaningless. And what he means by empty and meaningless is, don't let them tell you things that will trivialize or justify sin, that make it okay for you to go out and live a lifestyle that would be dishonoring to God. Don't let that happen. And by the way, there were a lot of those things in the Greco-Roman world at that time that were going on. For example, one of the most prominent philosophies that was out there that had begun to seep into the church was something called ntinomianism. Now, anti is against, right? Ntinomianism was against moral law. That had begun to seep into the church. Now think about what that means. You're talking about a moral God who calls our lives out to be different. And what he's saying is, don't let these people come in that are coming in going, well, we're against the moral law. There shouldn't be anything you have to do at all. You see, their philosophy was, or their belief was, that as a Christian, there's really nothing now that you have to obey. Nothing that you have to do. You can do whatever you want. In fact, they actually got to the point where they said, you know, because God has saved your soul and he's left you here in this fleshly body, just give in to the flesh and do whatever it wants so you don't have to battle all the time about it. Just go ahead and do that and God's grace will cover you. You realize what they're saying? Sin's no big deal. It's no big deal. In fact, they were even at the point where they would say, look, when you sin, you actually give God a chance to show his grace again. In fact, they got to the point where they even say, you know, it's actually a good thing because God's grace gets to be on display again. And the world will see that. That, wow, God's going to save that guy because this guy's terrible. And then God's grace will be shown again. Paul has dealt with this before. This wasn't just something that was just happening in the Ephesian church. This was something that happened really all over Asia Minor. Let me show you something. Keep your finger here in Ephesians 5 and go back to Romans chapter 6. Because Paul has to deal with this with the Romans as well. Remember, these are philosophies that are coming out of the Greco-Roman world. So Paul stops off in chapter 6 in verses 1 and 2. Listen to what he says. He says, what shall we say then? Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? Isn't that the argument that the antinomians were giving? Hey, just keep sinning and God will keep showering you with grace. He'll cover it all. Are we to continue in sin that grace may abound? By no means. How can we who died to sin still live in it? In other words, see, we're not supposed to keep doing that. We're not supposed to test God's grace. We're not supposed to keep doing that so God will continually, to forgive us. The point being is if God has actually saved us, I ought to be walking away from that. The antinomians were coming along and they were dividing the church. They were confusing people. I mean, their arguments had a sense of logic to it, not godly logic, but a sense of logic to it that just made sense. Well, if God saves you and his grace covers you, why don't you let grace just keep going?